Hello everyone, today's project is replacing the sink faucet here in the basement. And what we have here is a bottom of the line Lowe's Project Source faucet, cheapest one that can be had. And when it was installed, whoever installed it, I know it was done just before we purchased the house. Whoever installed it didn't bother to clean up the counter, so we can still see the gunk from the previous faucet that's under there. And when I was at Lowe's several weeks ago, I happened to stumble across this beauty. A nice Delta bathroom sink vanity faucet, and if you know it, it was on clearance. 30 bucks, was 110. Cannot beat that with a stick. So we are going to go through the process of replacing that. And first and foremost, we need to shut off the water supplies, and the water supplies should be found here underneath the sink. And this one hasn't installed correctly, so we're going to turn those off. It's a clockwise turn, and those are just quarter turn faucets. Looks like we got a bad valve because it's still on and I shut that off. And of course it's sealed on with copper. So this just turned into a bigger project. It's just on the hot side. This valve here going to have to be replaced. Now that is screwed on, so I can shut off the main water source and then replace this valve. And there's some corrosion happening on that valve, so I need a right angle. It's a 1/2 inch to the 3/8, and I'll need to pick that up before I can continue. So it took an incredibly long time to drain the water pipes, but I think I finally got them drained. The water heater had to be shut off because it was feeding back through the water heater, meaning I had a good 80 gallons to drain. So I got that shut off, and that helped. With the water drained out, we can work on getting the valve off of the copper feed line, and you want to be extra careful to support the copper feed line while you're turning the valve off of it. The last thing I want to do is twist that copper and damage the copper which runs up through the wall. That would be a huge repair. I ended up using a pipe wrench to support the copper pipe and a crescent wrench to turn the valve off of it. Unfortunately, there was no good angle to have the camera and be able to show that because my head was in the way. Before putting the new valve on, I used a wire brush to clean the threads up so they're ready for the new valve. Want those as clean as you can get them, and then we can just use some Teflon tape or some pipe dope on those to make sure it has a nice, good, lifelong seal. It was much cheaper to get a pack of 4 valves, and I know I'm going to use them eventually, so I picked up a pack of 4 valves so that I can change this valve out with a brand new one. Next, we'll perform some very careful and extremely precise measurements to make sure they're the same size. Yep, looks good. And now it's just a matter of installing it. And for this project, I actually used pipe dope. I tend to use pipe dope when it's a more critical area. I guess I just don't trust the Teflon tape as much. Wow, that was fast. Valve's on already. I guess I just had to cut out the spot where my big head was in the way. And there's the finished valve. We can turn the water back on now because those valves will shut off the water supply, and we can work on the faucet. Or better yet, change the other valve since we're here anyways and the water shut off. And we know the valve's leaking because it's 20 years old. Great time to change it. It does look pretty cruddy, in fact. With both the water supply valves replaced, we can now work on the faucet itself. Now the faucets are held down with these 2 nuts that you see here on the copper pieces that are coming down. We just need to twist those off. They are finger tight in this particular case, You can have a tool called a basin wrench that'll help you loosen those, but these guys are just pretty loose. I'm just going to twist them right off by hand. With those nuts removed, this will lift right out of there, and then we can prep for the new faucet. I will probably set that aside to use somewhere else. It is a brand new faucet. It's just not something that I want in my house. Perhaps maybe in a laundry room in one of the apartments or something. And we can use a scraper blade to scrape all this old gunk off, get this nice and clean. I don't know why this wasn't done before. It only takes a few seconds to do, but we'll get the surface prepped and ready for the new faucet. You do want to be careful depending on the surface you're cleaning. If this were a plastic sink top, I wouldn't be using a razor blade like this, but this is a pretty hard surface, so I shouldn't have any problem. With the surface clean, prepped, and ready, we can install the new faucet. I will often add a bead of plumber's putty around the bottom of the faucet just to make sure that no water leaks underneath it. You definitely want to check your instruction manual to see which the manufacturer recommends. Unfortunately, the video file of that was corrupted, so we're just going to continue on to the next part, which is screwing those new nuts onto the bottom of the faucet to hold it down. Then you can add your supply lines back, which I've already done. The supply lines actually have a rubber seal inside of them, so you don't have to use any kind of Teflon tape or dope or anything like that. You just screw them into place and the rubber will seat and give you a nice solid connection. In most cases, you can tighten these up with just a regular crescent wrench or a basin wrench for the ones up next to the sink, depending on how tight the area is. With this being a corner sink, I have a ton of room back here to work with. And this is the technique for adding the stopper. So you can use those little holes to change where it falls. And you just put that little crimp around it to hold it in place on the rod. And then that rod goes into the stopper and moves it up and down. So if you look at it from the top, when you lift and raise your piece there, if I can get my finger out of the front of the camera, there we go. That'll raise and lower it simply by moving that whole assembly up and down. And now we can turn the water supplies back on. And it looks like I did end up getting new water lines. They appear to be new. And I used a new drain, and I also used plumber's putty around the drain to make sure there was no leak in the drain. Once you're done, you can clean up all the plumber's putty around the drain and around the faucet, and then you can test your work. Since we have the water main shut off and drained, we've got air in the lines. That'll just blow out after a few seconds. And most important of all, no leaks.